it's mostly going to be advantageous to artists who have a lot of traffic. And we just didn't feel that that was as close to the fire as some of the other things that we needed to talk about. Right.
Right.
But it was important to me to state that I do think that Google Ads is a distinctly powerful platform. And I definitely don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking, oh, Google Ads suck. Google Ads don't suck. And YouTube ads don't suck. But YouTube ads do not work well for top of funnel unless all you want are those video view metrics. And here at INDIEPRO, that is just not what we're about.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by INDIEPRO.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am a host of this podcast, Corrin Campbell. With me is Jack. As always, this podcast is brought to you by INDIEPRO. And today we're going to be talking about YouTube/Google ads because they're one and the same if you didn't know. And I wanted to put a little plug in here at the beginning. I'm actually going to be doing a live ground report on basically some easy training on YouTube and Google ads at the end of November. So if you're interested in checking that out, or even if you're listening to this later, that will be in the ground report section last Wednesday of November. So either get in there and interact with me on that then, or if you're listening later, do it later. Never a bad time to join INDIEPRO. So let's roll into it. Jack, how excited are you to talk about Google and YouTube ads?
I am just, thrilled to talk about Google and YouTube ads on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon.
He's like, I'm just thrilled.
Yeah, I think that this will be an interesting topic to go into one way or another, whether we like it or not, because I think that there's a lot of areas for us to clarify and kind of give people some insight into, where Google ads and YouTube ads work, where we see them not work, and why that exists, why that continuum exists, especially for musicians. I think there's a lot to kind of unpack here. And I know you and I have talked about it plenty and kind of commiserated together on the strengths and weaknesses. So it'll be fun to just air it out.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, so we've been kind of teasing a YouTube/Google ads training. And actually I was teasing Google ads training. And I was like, and there'll be YouTube in it. And our community was like, YouTube. And then, assumed it was YouTube training, YouTube ads specifically. And so, Cirque and I were working together. I kind of outlined how I thought a Google ads training, which includes YouTube, how that training should be outlined. And, we went over that outline. He was like, look, I don't think people are interested in this stuff as much as YouTube ads. And we honestly don't have enough to say about YouTube ads to make a whole training on it. So, that's why we decided instead of launching an entire training about YouTube ads, which would be very, very short, instead we would be, just doing a ground report. And, it's an interesting illustration of kind of, because I think Google ads are quite beneficial. There's a lot of things about Google ads that, are great for various campaigns. And I think a lot of indies think the way they do about the way we run videos on Facebook as a fan finder, right? As this top of funnel awareness kind of thing. But there's a very specific kind of follow-up that we then train that goes into, getting people more into your funnel, more into getting to know you. And there's a lot of really powerful dynamics as far as that journey is concerned in the Facebook platform. In the YouTube platform, Google Ads platform, not so much. And that is where I think the biggest disconnect may lie, is that indies think that these video ads are one-to-one and they can serve the same purpose, and they absolutely don't. And so I thought it'd be good to talk about it. I've run quite a few ads at this level. Jack has also run a lot of ads at the YouTube level for, we have YouTubers and musicians who have been who have run YouTube ads in the past. So, Jack, what do you think? Is that a fair wrap up?
Yeah, that's great. I think that pretty much covers everything.
Yeah. And that's all for today. Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Creative Juice.
Right, exactly. I mean, it is true though. YouTube ads do not behave at top of funnel, right? Which is what we call ads that are essentially the first time someone comes in contact with you. And I know this is difficult for people to, to really embrace, but YouTube, as far as top of funnel, right? A discovery platform. YouTube is more like Spotify than it is like Facebook as far as how it functions and how you can retarget and how you can target in the first place, right? Because, like I said, the follow-up allowed on YouTube videos is just, it's not as granular. You can't, target specific artists in the same way. And so I think I'd like to start there, Jack. I'd like to talk about targeting.
Yeah.
And if you are going to delve into YouTube ads, even though we've obviously talked them up so much in the first 5 minutes of this episode, if you're like, well, by golly, I'm going to do it anyway, we're going to at least give you some information so that you understand some good ways to use it, some struggles you may come in with along the way, and how to make it at least as smart as possible. So let's start with targeting, Jack. Let's say do you have an example of a client in music, not your YouTuber clients, but your music clients that you've done some YouTube ads for?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, a lot of our IndieX clients have talked with us about wanting to run YouTube ads, and everyone, yeah. At some point in time, if you're a musician, you will ask me about running YouTube ads. And every time, my thought process will go through the same kind of motions. Most times in my mind that I find people asking about running YouTube ads, especially at top of funnel, comes from two reasons, or comes from two places of intention, we'll call it. And the first is thinking about YouTube ads in the same way that you would think about a fan finder on Facebook or Instagram. Right. Or the other intention comes from, I want to get more views on my videos.
Get me those views, though.
I want views, and I'll hope that those views will then turn into subscribers and people.
Or if they don't, whatever.
Yeah,
I've got views.
So those are the two tracks that kind of exist when it comes to questions that come about YouTube video ads at top of funnel. And here's kind of the challenges that are presented with both of those. As Corrin mentioned, as far as like discovery, introduction stage campaigns, top of funnel, YouTube ads don't function like a fan finder campaign on Facebook. They really don't. It doesn't involve the same kind of engagement that happens on a fan finder, stacking social proof and things like that. Even the placement of the video, meaning like the type of video ad, really doesn't function the same way as a newsfeed ad does on Facebook or Instagram. So if I'm interrupted with a video on YouTube, a video ad on YouTube, a pre-roll ad, for example, for your music video, that's not going to have the same psychological impact on me as, me scrolling a newsfeed and discovering something, because truth be told, you're being advertised to, right?
Right.
Definitely
you're more assertively.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very disruptive advertising. So for that to function well and to work in the same way, as far as getting cost per views and building up a warm audience, your video ad would have to be really, really engaging right off the bat. And that's taking out all of the, that's not even taking into consideration all the audience building and retargeting limitations that Google ads are presented with in YouTube. I'm leaving that out as if we're talking in a vacuum right now.
Right.
The type of content that artists often want to advertise on YouTube is their music videos, and sometimes like their cover videos or their acoustic videos or whatever. For pre-roll ads, that doesn't work. I'm going to just go out here and say that doesn't work well when you're thinking about it in the same context as a fan finder campaign. It just doesn't. The costs don't line up. Even if you're able to get sent video views, the benefit that comes from it later just doesn't exist. Oftentimes, and this is kind of going into the second intention here, is stacking views on a video. Oftentimes we don't even see that occur quite the same way. Like those earned views don't really happen. So you can sort of see here the friction that I come across when it comes to wanting to run these types of ads for artists is it just really doesn't have the impact for the overall ecosystem and the business of the artist long term, apart from I wanted some views on my video and give me some vanity metrics. And I think the same principle kind of applies to video discovery ads, which show up in the right hand side or in the video feed, so to speak, where you could present something more like a fan finder with headline copy that's meant to get someone's attention. But the same thing kind of applies. The pitfalls exist later down the line after you've quote unquote built that audience to what you can actually do with it. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying when it comes to what we do at IndieX for artists is usually have a pretty upfront conversation about all of those, downfalls in where YouTube ads at the top of funnel fit in or don't fit in to, your introduction stage campaigns. That's kind of the strategic point of view. Hopefully that all makes sense, but let's talk about targeting.
Wait, I'm not done with the last part.
I was just using the last part was just a preamble to get into targeting.
But
by all means, let's unpack it some more.
Yeah, let's undig it. So, my biggest issue with, and I think the things you need to consider when you start getting into, this whole, especially pre-roll, right? Pre-roll is probably one of the most popular ad placements. So essentially on YouTube, that is. So essentially, and if you don't have a YouTube premium account, you see these all the time. You go from one video to the next and it shows that little yellow bar at the bottom and it's an ad and you're wondering if is it skippable or not, right? Some of them, you can skip after 3 seconds. You can also do non-skippable, right? But either way, it's jarring. It keeps you from, the content that you went there intentionally for. So as Jack was saying, the disruption of the user behavior is so assertive, and which, if it's just a regular ad, for a product or something like that, maybe then you'll catch someone's attention. And that's why I think for products, this isn't necessarily a big problem. I think though, if you're trying to, if you've gone through our fan finder training, our intent is to make something look like an ad as little as possible when we are putting it in the Facebook video feed, etc. And we don't want people who are discovering this content to notice the difference between what they're seeing and the last post they were on, like their friend's video or whatever it is. So that is pretty much non-negotiable when you're talking about pre-roll placement, because they absolutely will know it's an ad. You cannot run a YouTube ad without some kind of link attached to it, right? Which is going to show on the ad. We always recommend with fan finders, probably don't put a button on it, right? Because it'll look more like an ad. With YouTube, you have no option. Even if all you want is for people to see the video, you still have to send them somewhere. You can't just run it for engagement. And so you'll have to put a button that either goes to your website, to your YouTube channel, whatever it is. So it's quite evidently an ad, and it is quite evidently very disruptive to the user experience. So those are the first two things where top of funnel, that's really difficult to do. Next, when you're looking in, when you run these things, you might get cheap views, right? But there's also a metric called earned views, which is different from the impressions that your video has the number of eyeballs that it's reached, right? So, Jack, do you want to expand a little bit more on the earned views section of this?
Yeah, so earned views or earned anything on YouTube is related to views or metrics or, comments, subscribers, engagement, whatever you want to get into, is related to the engagement that's happening after someone sees your ad. So those earned views are, follow-up views on other videos or secondary views on your ads video. Earned subscribers are subscribers that come from, people who saw your ad, and so on and so on and so forth. And that's kind of, it's interesting because that's kind of what people, I think, are seeking a lot of times when they're thinking about running top of funnel using YouTube ads or Google ads on YouTube. They're seeking that deeper, more earned engagement down the line. They're not, unless they're specifically looking for just views, vanity metrics on one video,
Right.
They're looking for that deeper engagement. And those
numbers are always shockingly low.
I was just going to say that is
like I've run ads on videos, for people and for myself where it's like 10,000 views, then it's like earned views 4. And I'm like, wow, like that essentially means that either one person went through to your channel and watched 4 videos, or at most 4 people went to your profile and watched 1 more video. Like it's crazy low, the conversion. And so that's why I think it's also really important if you are going to run YouTube ads on your video, know that metric, right? The earned views will show natively without you having to change your dashboard when you're running these ads, and look at that earned views, because that's going to, outside of the cost per view, right? It's something that you can read exactly, right? You can look into it very early on and see okay, what is the conversion? What am I actually paying for someone to do a second thing, which really shouldn't be that cray. For them to go to your profile or do something that's a very low expectation to have for any ad that you're running. So that's something that if you are going to run ads, look at that metric and kind of see what it's doing for you. Because I think, if you're currently running YouTube ads, or if you want to test it, despite all of our discouragement, if you do want to run that, keep an eye on that metric, because it'll give you a realistic perspective on what that ad spend is actually getting you. So yeah, that's one reason why I wanted to highlight earned views, especially.
Yeah, definitely. It's an important one to pay attention to, because, I think it kind of points out some of the weaknesses and the pitfalls in this kind of advertising that's so disruptive that people know they're being advertised to. And unless your content is for some crazy reason, super engaging to get the click through, then those kind of earned metrics are, like you said, the conversion rate's going to be super low. I've seen the same thing across tons of different kinds of artists. And to be honest with you, even as a consumer, I've never ever seen a top of funnel YouTube ad for an artist music video or something else that made me pay attention to it ever.
Right.
And I'm on the hunt for good stuff. I'm looking. I believe me. I want to see it. I want it to work, but I haven't.
Right. Well, what's funny about that is that the things that I have seen work for, and not as well as Facebook, and I didn't keep it running, but when I was running videos that were very specifically created for YouTube, top of funnel. So I'm still running my free plus shipping and handling for anyone who is wondering, at a much lower budget now, but I also wanted to try it in YouTube. And so first I tried it with the video I was already using on Facebook, which is a video that's on my YouTube channel as well. So I used that video at first. Nothing. Not worth it. No dice in any way, shape, or form. No molecules. Nothing. No atoms of anything. So I was like, okay, well, I want to give this a fair shot. So I did create a video that was the same as my Facebook one. And on Facebook, I basically have a bunch of historical montagey type videos. Some of it is like selfie shot, some of it is professional shot. It's all mixed up. And there's 3 of my songs, about 20 seconds of 3 of my songs, all kind of spliced into it. So it gives a little preview. And then, if people want to buy the CD, go get the CD. So what I, obviously realized is that as much as, musicians love posting their videos on YouTube, largely if you're talking about big budget artists, their face is like way in it, It's a, huge spotlight piece. These kinds of music videos are not casual. They're not, visualizers, right? These videos that are huge are either very distinctively purposeful animation style, or they are photo of the artist here, right? So I took the video that I was running on Facebook and spliced in, me chatting about the offer. And that did result in just like a few molecules. There were a few molecules that came from that. If we're talking about no versus some, right? There was a little bit more activity on that, but here's the thing. That's a video that obviously is running dark, right? That isn't something that I'm going to put on my profile. That would be weird. So,
right.
At that point, if you're looking for any kind of vanity metrics, that isn't the way to do it either. So there was definitely, a lot of challenges there. And after a lot of testing, you guys know I will spend my own money and I will test the bonkers out of this stuff to see if I can disprove myself and bring y'all something that is helpful. And unfortunately, going into this, I did not find anything helpful. And one reason why, segueing into the next point, one reason why it was not helpful was because of the placement and targeting options, which I think that, something that comes in my mind when I compare Google/YouTube ads with Facebook ads is that I feel as though Facebook is a little bit better at thinking about small audiences, small businesses running, small kind of offers to small audiences, right? And you can run wide on Facebook, obviously, but I think Facebook caters to it a little bit better when it comes to, being able to select that stuff for your campaigns. So when you go wide on Google, it's like, you gotta go wide. Like you are going to be forced to go to millions and millions and millions and millions of people because of the targeting. So Jack, what have you used in the targeting and what kind of stories can you share about your experience with various targeting interests?
Yeah, for sure. Before I dive into that, something you mentioned reminded me, and I can't believe that I forgot about this till now. But a story from IndieX. I want to say about a year and a half ago, we were working with one of our clients. It was a hip hop group, like a comedy hip hop group, really great group of guys. And they wanted to run they were big on YouTube, and they wanted to run some YouTube ads on a music video that they had done and really try to use it to, build up their audience, but also kind of get those views up.
They were like a satirical kind of content, right?
Yeah. They were. In some ways,
right?
Yeah.
So in theory, that would maybe be better for YouTube than a standard "I take myself super seriously" artist video.
For sure. Now here was the takeaway that I wanted to mention. Your point about cutting up content and running videos as dark played into this as well, and I think that this is kind of a learning point for any kind of artist. Is like, when you run videos of any kind, traffic of videos of any kind, especially on your music videos, which likely have extended intros or like, a credit scene in the beginning, that will kill your YouTube ad, especially if you're running pre-roll. And we ran into this with this group of guys. They wanted to run on a video that was, public on their page. They wanted to try and, juice it up, get some more views and build up their audience that way. And so we tried it, just running directly on the video that was, hosted on their channel. And it had this, kind of drawn out intro where the music sort of faded in and it was artsy and stuff. And that's all good. But for advertising, skip immediately. Not even skip. It's like, why is this ad dark? Why is there just like a slowly fading up black screen in this ad?
Yeah.
Like if I was a consumer, that would be what was going through my mind. So we ran into that. Obviously, like the cost per view was garbage right out the gate. So we ended up cutting in a different variant of the video with kind of like a hot take section, one of the bars that was like fire or whatever. And using that as the ad to point people to the video itself. That ad got a better cost per view, much better than the original campaign take. But then it just, again, didn't result in the end result that we were looking for, additional subscribers, better engagement, earned views. None of that really happened. So this is just another case in point that like you can do these things to try and optimize, but it puts you in a place where you're working suboptimally with a video that's dark, that probably still isn't really right for top of funnel on the platform. And it just led to, a lot of challenges. Your video example reminded me of this. I can't believe I forgot about this because it was like I think it was probably one of the first times at IndieX that an artist was specifically asking us to do this, and we got a chance to like iterate it on a few ways. Anyway, good stuff to keep in mind. But targeting. So
targeting, right? Which, I mean, you guys know if you've been through our Fan Finder training or if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, we've always tried to, back at the beginning of Fan Finder and when Facebook ads was not in its infancy, but, definitely not where it is right now. We would identify targets of artists that we sounded like, and they may not be huge artists, right? And those used to be targetable in Facebook. And Facebook has slowly been migrating those out, and we hear from indies all the time, like, why can't I target this particular artist, even if they have 1 million followers on Facebook or whatever? And, it's because Facebook is slowly phasing those out. And that's because people were doing what we recommended, which is really getting your audiences as dialed in as possible to the danger of maybe like micro niche targeting kind of level, right? Where it's just like, and if I hear one more thing about niche targeting, don't get me started on that. That's a whole other subject. Throw that away.
I'm about to unpack this in a second when it comes to Google Ads.
Okay. Well, then, it's all's fair in love and war.
Yeah.
So, so I think that that's what a lot of artists want to do. And when you get into Google targeting, it's like rock fans. And then sub rock fans, there's like indie rock, alt rock, and hard rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's it. You don't go any further down until you get to placements. But Jack, why don't we just talk about the interest targeting part of this first?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess there's like two ways to think about targeting with Google Ads, especially with YouTube. And exactly like you were saying, Corrin, like targeting is super, super broad. And I think that it's hilarious that it is that way because when you hear indies talk about YouTube ads, a lot of indies tend to get excited and they're like, oh, but on YouTube, I can target super, specifically who I want to reach. But when you actually get into the targeting section, it's ridiculously broad, rock fans, comedy, comedy,
music enthusiasts.
Music, pro audio, really broad targeting options. So, you're getting these super gigantic audiences, especially if you're going after, worldwide, getting into like big 6 kind of green light countries.
Right.
When it comes to location targeting, that's the interest base. That's kind of what you're looking at. You're looking at really broad audiences and that's it. Where things start to get interesting is like the second way to think about targeting on YouTube ads is in the placement section, which is like, that's like your next level of targeting. Like you're targeting these people, rock fans, and then you're targeting them on or in certain different kinds of placements. So other channels or other videos that you think your fans would hang out on. Now, here's the caveat, and I know you and I were laughing about this last week. Here's the caveat to that. That sounds great, right? It's like, that's perfect. That's like the dream scenario, exactly what I want. It's not, because that placement targeting relies on the traffic of these placements that you're choosing. So it relies on the traffic of the videos and the channels that you're putting out there. So, if you were targeting, for example, rock fans that like, I don't know, give me like what's an overlap for your fan base?
Asking Alexandria.
Yeah. Okay. So like rock fans that like Asking Alexandria, and you want your video to show on their channel and their channel's videos. That channel better have a lot of traffic.
Right.
Otherwise you're not getting impressions, or you're getting impressions and they're very expensive. And that's kind of like the spectrum of what you deal with when it comes to targeting for YouTube ads, like very, very broad, or, really, really packed in and narrowed down. And so like to get any middle ground, it's like, okay, I need to target broad, and then I need to jam in as many placements as I can possibly find and hope that it works out okay.
Right.
So you can see how this kind of becomes an issue.
It's like a bell curve, like you either have to go mega broad and have no control, or it's these individual placements. And if you think about it, artists, let's put this in Facebook terms, because I know more people probably listening to this have run Facebook ads because we never stop talking about them. So this is essentially how that would go. Like, instead of being able to target, for example, Sam Smith, when you are targeting someone who likes Sam Smith on Facebook, right? Or not who likes, who is in the audience that Facebook has deemed Sam Smith. This could mean they've interacted with his page.
That's an important delineation.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. We're not talking about page likes here, right? We're talking about who Facebook thinks likes Sam Smith. So that means if Sam Smith, even if he's not tagged in it, if he's in a video, right? If it's a performance video from another channel and blah, 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 if somebody likes that video, they now like Sam Smith as far as the targeting is concerned, right? If somebody posts about Sam Smith anywhere on their personal profile, on a page, if they comment on something that he's in, right? These are the elements that Facebook is considering when you say, I want to reach people who like Sam Smith, right? When you're talking about Google placements, though, you are talking about people who are interacting with a piece of content, right? A channel on YouTube. Not, did they interact with all of these other things that have to do with Sam Smith at some point in time? Did they go to a website that has Sam Smith on it? Did they do any of these things? That's not what you're doing. You are taking Sam Smith's channel and putting ads on that channel. So that's essentially like if someone decided to if they like Sam Smith and they go to Sam Smith's Facebook profile and your ad shows next to his top post, if that were a placement, which is not, but if it were,
right,
that would be it. And think about how many times you go to the pages, like Facebook pages of the artist that you like. Think about how often you actually go to the profile or the videos of artists that you like, right? You probably watched their video and then went and put the song on your playlist or bought the album or whatever it is that you did. So that's how you need to think about placements when you're talking about YouTube. Now, what you could do, right? I told you we would give you some tips, even though you shouldn't run these ads. But, if you do want to do something where you're saturating a specific audience, you may want to find, for example, if you're like, okay, rock fans, Asking Alexandria, something like that, you could run on Alt Press, right? Or run on Sumerian Records, like these larger umbrella type channels that have the content of those artists and are constantly reporting on it or sharing interviews of them or doing things like that. So that is one way that you can kind of zoom out a little bit, but that placement is still wickedly expensive, I promise you, and does not have nearly as much traffic as you would probably like. So, so yeah, it's definitely a bell curve. You either have to go very extreme and broad or very, very narrow. And, that can be really complicated. So I don't love for this purpose, for YouTube purpose specifically, I'm not a fan of these targeting parameters.
Yeah. It's almost a helpful way to shift thinking about placements and inventory and impressions, to almost think about YouTube ads in the same way that you would think about like display advertising on someone's website. 'Cause it really does kind of function that way.
Exactly functions that way.
Yeah. It's not like advertising on Facebook. It's not like advertising on Instagram.
It's not social integration, I think is really the point.
Exactly.
As much as we all wanted Google Plus to take off, that did not happen. And, that is the distinct difference, right? And music is a very socially bound kind of content. And, a lot of the style of many musicians' posting schedules is very like influencer marketing, right? And so that's the way people are used to seeing that kind of content. Whereas Google, and I want to pivot a second because this is really originally what the Google Ads training was when I outlined it. In my mind, Google Ads are very powerful for retargeting with product offers, for, visiting, if someone visits a site and then you want them to see the product that they were just looking at in all of those ads, as Jack was saying, on all of these different websites. It can make you omnipresent because now they see your face, they see your product everywhere. And so that is what is specifically helpful. And in my mind, the intent of Google Ads and how I use it in music successfully, but it's definitely not on the YouTube side. And it takes a lot of, different platform integrations. You have to have Google Merchant Center. You need to have Google Analytics. You got to have your YouTube. You got to have, you should have Google Tag Manager. Like there's all kinds of different pieces of Google that you have to tie in together to create this orb of Google coverage. And then you can run ads. So, and Google is also very limiting on, the kinds of audiences you can run to even within your custom audiences, because it wants you to see a certain number. It wants to see a certain number of people before you run ads to them, right? There's Gmail placement, there's display network, like there's all of these different things that, all require their own kind of audience limits. So it's very complex. And that's where I wanted Google Ads training to go. And, we ended up not going there because it is super technical and it's mostly going to be advantageous to artists who have a lot of traffic. And we just didn't feel that was as close to the fire as some of the other things that we needed to talk about. Right.
Right.
But it was important to me to state that I do think that Google Ads is a distinctly powerful platform. And I definitely don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking, oh, Google Ads suck. Google Ads don't suck. And YouTube ads don't suck. But YouTube ads do not work well for top of funnel unless all you want are those video view metrics. And here at Indiepreneur, that is just not what we're about.
Yeah, I think it can't be understated enough, or it can't be overstated enough how powerful Google Ads can be.
Totally.
Traffic is definitely like a big part of that though. Cause even for some of the bigger artists at IndieX who have, larger audiences, Google Ads can be challenging even at, high volume traffic levels.
Absolutely.
Because then it starts to rely on content, and making really great ads and thinking outside the box about, what are my display ads going to look like? If I want to do a YouTube ad for a specific product or an offer that I'm running, what will that pre-roll ad look like? You have to then, start to shift your thinking beyond just the Facebook news feed or the Instagram feed or, wherever you might be running on the Facebook ads platform. You now need to think about like, okay, well, like what is my other what is my other advertising collateral going to look like? And
Right.
I think that's the challenge that exists for some of the, larger artists that do have a lot of traffic, is making that shift and, being willing and open to do the work there. That's what I see a lot of. And that's why it tends to be a missed opportunity, because it's like, oh, well, I can just do the same thing that I'm doing on Facebook. You can't. It still has to be dialed into the platform. But I've seen plenty of amazing retargeting ads for products that I like, for brands that I like. I've gotten, hit with tons of pre-roll ads for products, and even like influencers, authors that I like, people that I follow in the marketing space, that blew me away, that I was like, oh man, like if I didn't already have what you're selling, I would totally click on this ad and buy it.
Right.
So yeah, I don't want that to be understated either, that I think that it's super, super powerful in that way, for that omnipresence effect, which, you really want to be tapping into to be top of mind with your fans and continue to move them through the buddy system.
Right. Yeah. And there is a similar, if you start looking at warm traffic, especially for smaller artists, warm traffic and retargeting is going to be where you're using Google Ads, or where you should be. When you start looking at going to cold, Google does have a feature that is like Facebook's lookalike, and that can be very helpful, but it doesn't unlock for a while. You need to have a lot of data on your analytics tracking ID or your web property, or whatever version of Google Analytics you're using. You have to have a lot of data there, and you can't force populate that. Right? You know how Facebook will be like, you need at least 1,000 people to make a lookalike. Google's like, we'll make you a lookalike when you need one.
Yeah.
They do not let you just create a lookalike. And, that's where that also gets precarious. So, chances are, let's say that you build an audience, and the way that is easiest to do this is if you're running analytics and you're running Google Ads, right? Formerly AdWords, right? And overlapping with YouTube. If you build an audience in analytics, and then you share it to your own AdWord account or your ads account, whatever the name of it is. Everybody's changing everything. The dashboards constantly change. But if you make that audience and you share it to your ad account, then it will take however long to populate, which sometimes it can be a week. I've seen it take a long time. Once it populates in there, then the Google Ads will basically determine when there's enough room, and enough information for you to now make, or for it to make a similar to audience, right? Which is similar to name of audience is basically Facebook's lookalike audience of whatever audience. So, and I would say if you don't have that yet, don't advertise to cold with Google. That's my thought. If Google doesn't think you're worthy of a similar to audience yet, you're probably not. And that's okay. You know what I mean? That's all right. Because largely for musicians, we're not going to want to do a ton of cold targeting outside of video. And honestly, if you're not to the point where you have a similar to audience in Google to run for a YouTube ad, then you probably shouldn't be running YouTube ads on your, for top of funnel yet, So it's kind of a good little measure as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I think that it was important to me that we come talk about it, because I do think that there's a common misconception in our community that, hey, if I just do the same thing on YouTube as I'm doing on Facebook, it'll work the same. And it really distinctly doesn't. And I think the biggest thing that needs to be considered by an indie who's thinking that way is, look, Facebook is a social platform. Instagram is a social platform. YouTube is a content platform, and it is different. And the way people interact with it is different. And yes, there are comments and there are all kinds of deep threads. And I get that. I've been on PewDiePie's channel too. Okay. Like there is a social element to it, but its primary function is not to have ads blend in with social content and be less obvious. Its goal is to take ads and put them in your face and smack you with it. So if you're going to use YouTube ads, make sure that your content does exactly that, smacks people in the face, or you're going to waste a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great point, especially because it's very easy to waste a lot of money on YouTube ads at top of funnel, not knowing that it's not really working for you. You know, you might see
like,
those
10,000 views at a penny a piece. That's awesome.
Exactly. You might see that, and then you might be spending $500, $1,000, whatever it is, you know, whereas that budget could be reallocated to something that actually functions well for you. But I do think it was really important for us to mention all of this because it's easy to get duped into, especially because like looking at the Google Ads dashboard, to me, I find it to be, when I first started getting into it, I found it to be more confusing than when I first looked at Facebook ads. That's for sure. So I think it's easy to get tripped up and think like, oh, something's working and it's actually having a benefit for you when it's not. Yeah.
And it's very similar to a fan finder in that there's a total opportunity for dopamine addiction in this process. Yeah. You know, I know there are a lot of indies who go through the fan finder method and run these, or even if you haven't done ours and I can't even think of a number of how many Facebook video ad trainings there are for musicians out on the planet, you know? And if you've done any of those, you've probably had that dopamine hit, right? Where it's like, OMG, 5 people had watched this video and then I put $10 on it and now I have 10,000 views, you know? And there is obviously something that feels very good about that, but you really have to think about quality and not quantity. And, you know, we're targeting, if we run a fan finder, we're retargeting people who have watched a significant portion of that video. And that's a much smaller number. So, you know, just try to gauge it that way. If it can be very exciting if you only have, you know, a couple hundred subscribers and aren't getting a lot of consistent views on your YouTube channel, yes, 10,000 views can feel very exciting. But I would really encourage you to think long term. Now, one thing I would say is that you always want to be prepared for the thing that you don't yet have access to, right? So get Google Analytics on your site. Get an analytics property for your YouTube, right? And get that populating, because I can still see Google Analytics data from 2007 when I put the tracking tag on my very first website. Yeah, and it's still in there, you know? And Google doesn't let you actually target people from that far back, but it definitely does help you track over time. And when you have that tag, like let's say you don't have a ton of traffic right now, but then you do some Facebook stuff and you do an album launch and all of a sudden you've got a lot more people on your site, Google might eventually see enough people to give you a similar to, right? And in that situation, you want to have that historical data so you've got the opportunity to now graduate into the good things about Google ads and potentially YouTube ads. So if you don't have that on your site, you know, definitely put it there. Doesn't mean I would say run YouTube ads right now, but you always want to prepare for the opportunity to do so later.
Yeah, hopefully this has been like a helpful kind of expose on thinking short-term and long-term about Google ads, because
a helpful wagging of the finger.
Yeah, exactly. A cautionary tale. That's how we do
it here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, if you are interested in learning a little bit about how to, you know, screw up YouTube ads the least of all the options, again, I'll be doing that ground report at the end of November, last Wednesday in November, and you can gain access to that through our INDIEPRO membership. So you can do that at obviously INDIEPRENEUR.io. We would love to hear from you there. Or if you're on YouTube, leave some questions in the comments below. I'll be checking back in to see if I can answer any of your questions. Or if you think I'm dead wrong, prove it. I'd love
Please.
to see you in the comments.
Something that we always talk about is like, hey, love to be proven wrong.
Yeah. Oh, I love to have someone slap the dogma right out of me. Doesn't Doesn't happen often, but I'd love for you to be that person. So anyway, so that is it for today. I will just plug, if you haven't done your Black Friday planning, do your Black Friday planning. I know we sure are. And so for the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that, we've seen indies need. Every time you're planning for a sale, it's really great to look into what your audience may need or may want, right? And so we here at Indiepreneur have done the same thing. And so that's going to help inform the next couple of episodes. So we plan on making things very helpful and less lectury over the next couple of episodes. But otherwise, I hope everyone has enjoyed this. You got any closing statements, Jack? Any final words?
I just hope that this gives you guys a helpful perspective on Google Ads, gives you a little bit more insight into, the super secret targeting that doesn't really exist. And, it gives you some fuel to think about if you decide to test out YouTube ads, especially at the top of the funnel, things to be paying attention to, things to be careful about. And like Corrin said, I hope more importantly that you're planning out some badass Black Friday and holiday offers for your fans, because that's way more important than running YouTube ads. Oh, I said it.
Well, and if you, take what you learn from this episode and come to the ground report, I can show you how to retarget all of your Black Friday non-customers with a holiday sale. Sounds like a win. So hopefully I will see you in INDIEPRO. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on Creative Juice.
Peace out.